Let me do a quick survey to see who is awake. So who has ever minted an NFT? Raise your hand. Okay. Who has read the ERC-721 interface spec? Okay, fewer people. Who has deployed the contract themselves and like uploaded the metadata, so basically created an NFT collection or NFT contract? Okay, a few people. I'm hoping this is not too simple for you guys, so my main fear was making it too simple, but let's see. So what NFTPort does essentially is there's this whole lot of infrastructure that you need to interface with to launch your NFT contract, to be able to mint NFTs essentially, and to use NFTs in your game. And what NFTPort does is we abstract that away. So NFTPort offers an API, a REST API, where you can do simple things or like these concrete actions with single API calls. You can deploy a contract, mint an NFT, transfer or burn an NFT. Each of these is a single API call. And all of these are like writing to different chains. Or you can read from different chains, get the wallet's NFTs, get the collection NFTs, get the details of an NFT, etc. And we try to make it as simple as possible to use NFTs so that it can become the sort of like standard, very easy to use, broadly used technology that we imagine it to be. On top of the API, we actually have the Unity SDK as well. It is mostly a kind of like relatively simple pass-through layer. So every action maps to every Unity SDK action very clearly maps to one of the API actions, except deploy contract, which we didn't really see a use case for. But essentially, I'll be talking through the API examples, but in the latter part of the talk, I'll share the Unity SDK link, and essentially it's like one-to-one using the SDK versus using the API. So why should you care? I spent a bit more than a year of my life trying to build products and failing, several times in a row. And one thing I very quickly learned with the first failures is that you don't really know whether what you're building is useful if you don't ask money for it. So someone saying they might use it, or someone even using it but not having to pay for it, it's not really a strong signal. So even if it is not sort of like critical for you, if you don't need to make the revenue, then to figure out whether people are getting value from your application or whether people are enjoying your game, then adding a business model or trying to monetize in some way, it can be a very, very strong signal of value to your users or to your players. And the typical, like the standard web2 business model for games, or one of the standard ones, is ads, right? And we as a community, we have sort of decided that we don't really like that. So we would rather use something else, some other model. And basically the other main model, there is someone has to pay, right? Like so in the end, there has to be money coming from somewhere, and if that is the user, then there's like direct alignment between the user and the source of money. So if the user is paying for the game, that's sort of the ideal. Now the question is, how do you actually integrate that, or how do you actually use NFTs to do that? Because in the Web2 world, you can, like, the models are relatively clear. So you could sell the game, like buy the game for $50, and then you sort of own it, or you can at least play it in perpetuity. Or there may be some monthly subscription. You can sell boosts, you can sell some unlocks, extra content, etc. And the question is like, how do you use NFTs to implement user payment models in your game? And I think there are two aspects of NFTs that actually make it easier, or like where NFTs are unique and allow you to build a business model that you can't really do as easily in Web2. And the two things are, first, you can pay for permanence. And the example I want to share here is, there was a time, like, I think it was 10 years ago, 8, 9, 10 years ago, where there was this mobile game called Hill Climb Racing. Essentially, like, you have a car, you try to go up a hill, try to reach as far as you can, and that's pretty much the game mechanic, like upgrade your car, more difficult levels, etc. And I'm sure I spent like hundreds of hours on that game, even though it's very simple. And at the end, when I uninstalled the game, it was all gone. Like, there's nothing left. And I am very sure I would have been willing to spend like, I don't know, 10 euros, 20 euros to sort of memorize this somehow. So maybe mint this as an NFT or bring it out of the game so that I am left with a memory or of the achievement that I got from the game. And it's weird because then it's sort of, I would have voluntarily paid for sort of minting an achievement. And I think this is actually a model that not many people have tried, and one that I would actually like to see more is everything being free, but if you want to make it permanent, if you want to take the data, the milestones, the achievements out of the game, then you pay. And that's uniquely enabled by NFTs because it's off-chain, you can't really, it's not really permanent. On-chain, it is. And the other thing about NFTs is they're instantly interoperable. And what I mean by this is, if you saw a couple of months ago, Instagram released support for NFTs. So you can connect your wallet and sort of like showcase your NFTs in the Instagram, in your Instagram profile. Unfortunately, not in Europe because of GDPR, but like that's the trend we're going towards. And if you imagine the world where a user has their wallet connected to Instagram, and now they come to play your game, then the moment you give them an NFT, or the moment they receive an NFT or buy an NFT in your game, it is instantly a social experience. They can instantly show it off on Instagram, or if Reddit adds supports for NFTs, or Snapchat, or whatever the social platforms, when they adopt NFTs, and I think this is happening, then there's this interoperability, which again, you just don't really have with a Web2 or off-chain solution, right? Like you could give some tokens or milestones or whatever off-chain in your app, but you would have to convince Instagram to integrate with your particular achievement system, and NFTs just like resolve all of that for you. So that's the second pattern that NFTs, I think, sort of a reason I'm optimistic about NFTs as a source of monetization for games. And the main, like the very obvious, I think the most commonly talked about pattern for how to monetize with NFTs is token gating. So token gating essentially like if you hold a token, then you can unlock something. If you don't hold it, then you can't. And it's I think the metaphor is actually pretty good. Like you walk up to your gate, the token is the key, you unlock the gate to get in. If you don't have the token, you don't get in. And there are many ways or many things you can actually token gate. So you can token gate access, just like being able to access the game, season pass, subscription, or monthly pass, whatever. You can token gate particular functionality. So if you hold the NFT to access a particular part of the map, only then you can get there. Or NFTs for particular levels, NFTs for functional items. You can only use a particular sword or car or whatever if you have that relevant NFT. This is more common. You can also token gate non-functional items. So NFT avatars, NFT apparel on the avatars, NFT skins, etc. So like the design space is pretty broad here because essentially token gating is just like a form of authorization and the users can sort of hold the NFTs and trade them as means of moving the authorization between users. And essentially token gating is like to integrate it into your application, you need basically two steps. One, the user needs to get the NFT from somewhere. And this is where where you can build your business model around. You sell the NFT to the user, that's where you make your money, and then when they come to your application at runtime, you need to check whether the user has the NFT or not, so you can tell whether you should allow them the access or not. And I'll go through two different ways to do it, and ways you can use NFTPort to implement those. So how do you sell an NFT to the user? The standard way people do it today, like people who launch NFT collections, is you deploy a smart contract, you build a minting D app, or essentially a website around it that makes an RPC call, and the user goes to the website, connects their wallet, signs the transaction, pays a fee, and they get the NFT. So essentially, that's the flow here. Like you don't really need a website even as well. Like you could just use a Polygon scan or Etherscan or something. The user makes the RPC call, they get back the NFT. This is a very simple approach. And you can do that within a few minutes with NFTPort. So I opened up the documentation website for the endpoint where you can deploy an NFT collection contract. And I prepared the parameters as well, so you don't have to write them from scratch. So essentially, what do you need to specify to deploy a contract with NFT? Chain, we'll be deploying it on Polygon. This is the name of the contract. This is what will show up as the collection on OpenSea, for example, and other marketplaces. So my game is called, let's say, Testland Season 1, and I'm selling passes here. Max supply could be anything. I'm saying only 100 people can get access. Mint price, half a matic, so that's like $50 cents. Owner address, this is both of these are my own address. Some of these other parameters are not as important, but the pre-revealed token URI. So essentially, this is what will define how the NFT will look like when people mint their passes. And this is actually where IPFS comes in. How do you actually define the token, how the token looks like, the image, the metadata. So essentially, you need to upload the image to IPFS, then upload the metadata to IPFS, which refers to the image, and then you'll be able to deploy the contract. We have endpoints for that. So one API call is upload the file to IPFS, literally attach a file to the body of the post request, and it's uploaded to IPFS, pinned by Filecoin. This is by our friends at web3 storage, so they take care of that. And then the second step is to define the metadata and upload that to IPFS. I've done both of these steps before. Let me show you the metadata here. So this is the metadata. Name, Testland Season 1 pass, description gives access to Testland, and the file URL refers to the IPF file that I already uploaded on IPFS. And this is what the file looks like. So let me go ahead and take the contract, which I deployed last night. So essentially, you can use this endpoint. We went through the parameters, one API request, and within like 10 to 15 seconds, the contract is deployed on Polygon. You can also do ETH, but obviously the costs there are higher. In the contract, so going back to where we started actually, you make the RPC mint call. I didn't set up a minting website, but I can write the contract on Polygon Scan, connect my wallet, call the mint function, half a matic, one token. Submit transaction. It's pending, and it should show up on OpenSea in a few moments. So this is one of the main, or like one way to give NFTs for tokenating content later. This is sort of the least central way, I would say. So the only thing that you actually have control over in that case will be the contract that you deploy. If you want, and in many cases you might want more control. So you might want to take an API approach, and this is something that we enable as well. So this is your app, the game you're building. This is the NFTPort API. This is the contract that you deployed on chain. This is the user. So the user pays, or maybe they come with like a coupon or something, or maybe they do something that you like and you want to drop them an NFT. Your application makes an API call to NFTPort. The API call, like the semantics being, please mint an NFT into that contract. Then we, on our side, we do all of the gas handling, the token, like custodying the coins needed to pay for the transaction, etc. We make the RPC call to the contract, and the NFTs, the RPC call we make will have the user's address in it, and the user receives the NFT. The reason you might want to do that is it's essentially more flexible, because in the case on the left, you either have to have the user mint directly, sort of either in your app, you need to make the integration yourself, or they need to leave your game, or you need to do a lot of work to essentially build or replicate what we have built, which is the simple interface for minting programmatically. And the approach on the right, let me see how we're doing for time. The approach on the right, I'll run you through how you can do that as well. So we have different kind of contract for that. You can deploy a contract for NFT products, and I'll do that live as well. So let's do it right now. Chain polygon name. So the imaginary scenario here is let's have a contract where each NFT represents a car in the game that we have, or in the Testland game. So let's call it Testland Cars. I'll be the owner of the contract. ERC721 token, and the roles are not that important right now. Oh, my JSON has an error somewhere. Okay, and with one API call, I got back my transaction hash. Let me go ahead and check it on Polygon scan. Pending right now, including block. And usually within 5, 10, 15 seconds, it is on the chain. The next step from here is, once I've deployed the contract, I did this via the API, now I can make the minting calls. So again, to do that, I need to upload the image and the metadata to IPFS before I do that. So let me go ahead and do that here. So let's have this test Lorian. This is the image we're attaching to the NFT. Getting back an IPFS URL immediately. Create the metadata for it. And maybe let's add some attributes as well. So let me find the attributes. So I added some attributes which you might want to use in your game. And these will also show up on marketplaces. Okay, the metadata is in IPFS, and all that remains now is to actually make the minting call. So let me go ahead and customize your mint, paste in the metadata URI, contract address. So this is the contract I just created. And let's mint this to myself. Okay, and again, with one API call, I got back the transaction hash. Let me go ahead and find it on Polygon scan. Including the block. You should be able to, yeah, we can also see it in the contract. So again, one API call, the NFT is there, and it was minted to the user that I specified in the API call. Let me see if actually OpenSea it has already indexed it. So it's going to be in the hidden tab most likely. Yep, and it's here. It also shows up on OpenSea. So essentially, I went through these two approaches, and now the user has an NFT. All we need to do is figure out, so once a random person shows up at the gate, we need to figure out whether they have the right NFT. And we also got you covered here. So essentially, the approach is the user, they have an NFT. Your application the user connects their wallet to your application. You can ask from NFTPort API, give me the list of NFTs that this user has. And we'll come back to you with the list they own, and also the images, 3D assets, attributes, everything that you might want to use to actually display or render it in your game. And based on this, you can authorize the user and maybe actually render the NFT in some way. I'll just show you very quickly, because this is just one API call. Retrieve NFTs owned by account. Let me get my account address. And take on Polygon. This will have a long list. This is all the tokens that I have, but you can restrict it to your particular contract. So in general, NFTPort indexes the whole chain, right? But if you want to look at only the contract or the contracts that are relevant to you, then we can filter down to that as well. And I include the metadata as well, and now you can see. So with the second API call, at the time that the user connects their wallet, we can figure out, do they have the relevant NFTs? So you can essentially ask, for this user, give me all the cars that they own, all the NFTs that they own in the car contract. And you can get back all of the data here, which is essentially all of this allows you to render the view that you can see on OpenSea. And you can actually also render the 3D versions. If you attach a 3D asset instead of just a 2D image, you can also render that and fetch that. One thing that I want to highlight here, one thing that we do is, I'm sure you have seen if you've worked with NFTs at all, people store their assets and metadata in various places. So can be an IPFS link. If it works well, that's great. But it could be dead, or it could be stored somewhere where the response time is like 60 seconds or 200 seconds, times out half the time. Or it could be on an off-chain storage, it could be in Google Drive, could be a link that is down. And what we do is we essentially cache on our side. We pull in all of the metadata, all of the assets, so that when you we sort of act as a CDN or as a cache layer for NFT data. So when you want to get the image, you can get it, you can see it's in a Google bucket, which is sort of more consistently reliable and lower latency than you typically get from the average NFT if you go directly against the storage that they have specified there. Okay, and with these two steps, so giving the user an NFT and checking whether they have an NFT, this essentially allows you to token gate anything that makes sense within your game, within your app. The second main pattern I wanted to share is milestone drops, or that's what I named it. I'm not sure if there is a standard name, but this is what I alluded to earlier with the hill climb car game, right? Like the user has reached some point in the game, there's some achievement, some milestone, and you can give them the option. They don't necessarily have to do it, but you can give them the option to mint that milestone into their wallet. And again, if you tie it all together with what I said before, the flow could be they achieve something cool in your game, they mint it into an NFT, and 5 seconds later, it's on Instagram, shareable. And in that sense, I would say this is a powerful pattern. I don't think many game developers, or in general developers, have explored it, because it's like a share button that uses NFTs as the sort of technical implementation behind it. And since it is very early, I think this can be a very interesting growth channel for you if you're working on a game. And essentially, like I said, it could be completing a level, achievement, discover the secret item that was optional in the game, off the main path, or it could be time played, whatever you can come up with where you sort of which are standard parts of the game design. You can monetize them either one of two ways. One is that you could just have have the user mint it, so they pay you for the privilege of getting the thing as an NFT, the achievement as an NFT, or you could monetize it by giving it to the user for free or for marginal cost, and then earning royalties off of that. So this is sort of you would probably want to make sure that there is a reason for there to be a secondary market. Otherwise, you're actually not going to make money off of that. But that's also an option, essentially. And the approach here is like quite similar to before. Essentially, you need to give the user an NFT. With the DApp approach, you can do it with NFTPort as well. I'm not going to go through the details, but basically, like if you whitelist the user in a contract, then that sort of acts as a selective filter for who can mint an achievement. And the API approach is essentially the same as before. The user, either you take like off-chain payment or the user takes an action, it may be free, and your application decides, okay, now it's a good time to mint to that user, make a post endpoint call. You can make a post call to the NFTPort API. We call the minting RPC, and the NFT is dropped to the user. So I said before, and I know I haven't really like delivered on the title really, which is integrating this with Unity. Let me show you quickly the Unity documentation that we have. So in the API docs, we have a Unity section. You can do literally every part of it. Everything that I just showed you, you can do in Unity as well with native function calls. It's very easy to get started. You can use Unity Package Manager to test it out. It takes a few minutes. And there's a feature list. So you can see like the feature parity by chain. So what is available in the SDK and what isn't. Let me show you a showcase of the Unity SDK. So let me connect my account. And I think there's something else I need to do, which I forget. But we can look at, maybe a better way to look at this, take a collection. So let me explore a collection. And now, using the NFTPort Unity SDK, we're actually loading all of the NFTs within that collection. And as you can see, we're actually loading and rendering the 3D assets as well, because in many cases, NFTs hold 3D assets. So this is the sandbox assets contract. And if you look around, there's there's a bunch of stuff. By the way, I'm just warning you, the playground is going to crash in a moment because there's no memory management, but it's just a limitation of the example, not really the SDK. So within Unity, you can very easily fetch both image assets and the main prize, which is the 3D assets as well. And you could do it. You saw the load time here. These assets may be relatively big, but like you can do it relatively fast because we cache them in a centralized storage. You can also mint NFTs from within the game, and there's a demo of this. I won't go through all that, and you can go through the demo as well later if you want on your own. Right, and to summarize my talk, so try to make money as a form of validation. To do that, either sell NFTs that gate content or let users mint meaningful moments to them. The things that I showed you, you can find all of that in docs.nftport.xyz. You can sign up for free. You can mint 100 NFTs, deploy 5 contracts, get a free API key, get all of that done within a few minutes to see whether that would actually work for you, for your game. And if you want to check out the Unity SDK, then that's on our GitHub at nftport/nftportunity. But if you Google NFTPort Unity SDK, you will find that as well. And if you want to get in touch with me, then my email is at taivo@nftport.xyz. I'm very happy to talk to you. Especially, I would love to hear from you if you're building something where sort of you have like issues or pains around emitting NFTs or using NFTs within your game. So try to hit me up after the talk. And that's it. Thank you very much.